The informational meeting will begin in 1 minute.
I call this meeting to order and welcome to the Monday, February 5th, 2018 informational meeting. We are meeting on a Monday because plans have been set for some of the council members to attend the South Dakota Municipal Days at the legislature tomorrow and Wednesday of this week in Pierre. So the first order of business is a report from Audit Committee meeting of Thursday, January 25th.
Suppose you're looking at me for that.
That's the direction that I was looking.
Oh, okay. Yes, we met on January 25th, the Audit Committee. We had a very good meeting. One of the reports and updates, we had a report from Ide Bailey, who is our auditor, our city's auditor. The audit is coming along very nicely and should be completed by the middle to the end of March, which is right on time, and we should be able then to make a presentation sometime in early April to the Audit Committee and then to an informational meeting also. So that's coming along very nicely, and work is being done. There was an audit report also on maintenance of administrative instructions. Doesn't sound like that might be, too important or anything, but these are policies and procedures that are within the departments and executive orders that are within our city government. So the audit found that executive orders are accurate, up to date, and regularly maintained. And 2, policies and procedures are accurate and up to date with a few exceptions. Now, the Audit Committee recommended that the city establish and document a plan for managing the approval, issuance, and revision of internal policies and procedures. Right now, they're done internally within each department, and the auditors felt there needed to be a set system for everyone to use so that they would come out, and everybody could understand them, that kind of thing, and where they would be located. We then moved on to the audit report on waiver of fees and fines. The purpose of this audit was to identify how much revenue is foregone annually due to fees and fines being waived and to determine how those decisions are made. This is a typical thing that an audit committee would look at, so that to make sure that there's we're not giving away the farm or somebody is not trying to make sure that everybody in the city of Sioux Falls has, free parking or something along those lines. The audit find there is not an excessive amount of fees and fines being waived. It's not a common practice for departments to waive fees and fines. There was an article in the paper that the headline, like usual, indicated that there was a whole bunch of stuff happening there. When you got deeper into the article, it said this amount is only 1% or less of the total amount of fines that are given out each year. So it's minuscule. It's really minuscule. And these are things like they said, building permits for nonprofit organizations. It's our custom to not charge for those. These are the kind of things that we do. Parking fines for people outside of our metro area. We want to encourage people to come to our city, not to discourage them. So then we had a report from on follow-up on audit recommendations. Kim Schroeder, our department head, noted that in 2016, there were 12 total audit recommendations, all of which were agreed to by management. 75 of the recommendations were implemented within 1 year, which is really, really good. And the rest of them, the other 3 are on their way to being implemented. So it's been very good. She also presented an audit plan for 2018. They're well on their way to doing that, to getting that, or they've started it, and they'll get it done by the end of the year, along with some follow-ups on this year's audits and the recommendations that were given there. And then we approved continuing education for our 3 auditors to continue their education, their auditing upgrades. And then the RFP committee for the selection of the audit company for the city was made also and was put out, and so that the audit or the RFPs are coming in on the they're supposed to be in by the 8th of this month, and then that committee will do some selection. So
That's it?
I made it short this time.
Thank you for your very detailed report, Councilor Rolfing. Any questions of the councilor? Okay, then moving on, that brings us up to...
Oh, no, I think I'll open discussion.
Okay. All right. We're moving on to item number 3, which is City Council open discussion. And Councilor Staley.
2 things. First of all, I just wanted some clarification from Councilor Rolfing, and maybe as a group we can talk about this. But now the RFP for the audit of the city, you said you're going to make those members public, correct?
No, I never said that. I indicated some. I indicated some were who some of them were, but I didn't do all of them. And as you got in your email announcing who they are, it's for internal use only. So
right, I just was under I thought that you had made a comment at the meeting.
No.
These names were going to be public this time. No. Okay, so they're still. So every time, whenever we have an RFP committee, the names are always going to be confidential. Is that correct?
Unless something changes, yes.
Okay, and then
you know the purpose of that.
So that they cannot be
lobbied by people
right.
that are there, even though it says in the RFP that you cannot contact city employees or council members. It can happen, and so that's one way of safekeeping it.
But I think you did mention some people's names at that meeting.
Yep,
is that correct?
I mistakenly did, but not all of them.
Okay. And then the second thing I wanted to bring up is I know Councilor Neisert is going to be bringing up an ordinance talking about the threshold that we have for the Charter Revision Committee to, or Commission to put something on the ballot. Right now, there's nothing really firmed up, so going from kind of a mishmash to saying 4 out of 5. So I did ask Tom Greco, and I'm very appreciative of his efforts, and our Assistant City Clerk, Tamara, to put together a history of the charter amendments that have actually passed. And I was interested to know who was bringing those forth. And he's done a great job, so I'll be sharing that with the rest of the council here as we consolidate that. But also, I thought it would be interesting to see how many were proposed that didn't come through as well. So we see if this is something that's being abused now and there's too much happening and showing up on the ballot, or is it already having kind of a common sense approach to it. So just wanted to say that, and again say thank you for your efforts, Mr. Greco.
Okay. Councilor Erpenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to, just sort of informational, I have been, it's going on 2 years now, part of the steering committee for what's being called the Sioux Empire Network of Care. And we've had a report from them a couple of different times. It's being hosted by the Helpline Center, and what's happening is the Helpline Center got a Bush Fellowship or Bush grant for figuring out how to help our nonprofits coordinate and collaborate, especially in terms of those people who are the most needy in our community, the homeless and those folks at the risk of being homeless. And so we know there are lots of different organizations in Sioux Falls who are involved with those folks in different ways, shape, or form. And the Sioux Empire Network of Care is working to bring all of those folks together in terms of some sort of report, some sort of software. And so I was at a steering committee meeting this morning, just wanted to share with you that this group is doing amazing things. They started out, the first year was a pilot. They did 5 organizations in that pilot, and now they're up to 7 organizations. And obviously the goal is eventually they will all be involved with that. But it's a slow process and training folks. And I just wanted to lift those guys up again, that they're doing an amazing work. And then I, of course, left my notes in the car. So of the 7 entities, I can remember 5. I apologize to the 2 I forgot. Dress for Success was just added. Community Outreach, St. Francis House, Salvation Army, and Feeding South Dakota are all involved in 2 more. And I, again, apologize. But again, Sioux Empire Network of Care, something for us to continue to be aware of as the City Council. I hope that as I step away from this role, that perhaps one of us will have some sort of it's just an advisory. I just sit there and help them understand where we come from as a government organization. But just wanted to lift that up to you all to remind you that it's happening and they're doing great things. So it's good to watch.
Thank you very much, Councilor Erpenbach, and thank you very much for your involvement as well. Councilor Starr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of things. About a month ago, I talked about the library hours during city holidays that didn't match up with the school district, or the school district being in session, and our libraries being closed at the same time. And I had a really great meeting with the director of libraries, and we talked about a number of things. And we'll get a chance next week to really talk about after-school care, where some of our youngest people go once school's dismissed for the day, whether it's our community centers, our libraries, the YMCA after-school program, and just more than anything to let you know that I've been following up a little bit on it and kind of getting an idea of what our role is and how we can best serve our young people of our community to make sure that they stay out of trouble more than anything else, and continuing their education during the course of the day. The other thing that I had been working on that I want to bring to us, we're in the middle of that election season starting, and we hear a lot of the candidates, and we hear a lot of us as council members talk about affordable housing, or the lack of affordable housing here in Sioux Falls. And what are we doing to make affordable housing better? And I kind of challenged myself. I said, well, what are we doing as a city? I know we have community development block grants. We work with a number of groups. So I've been working with staff and Director Ketchum in community development, as well as Les Kinstead, to put a report together. What are we doing as a city, as our part? What are we doing, and what could we be doing to maybe improve affordable housing? So in the next couple of weeks, we'll have an informational scheduled where I've invited both the director and Mr. Kinstead to come and kind of give us an overview of where we're spending our money, kind of a background of budget of exactly what we're doing, and then really taking a look at what the state contributes that passes through to us. So just to say, yeah, it's one thing to say we need more affordable housing in Sioux Falls, but what are we doing? And we're already doing a lot. So what can we do to improve on what we're doing? So, and to get the best bang for our buck and make sure that we are. And I think it fits in the spirit of what we've been doing when we've looked at the partnerships that we've had with nonprofits, and next week's fiscal committee meeting really diving deeper into that. So having an idea of what we are doing for affordable housing.
Okay, thank you, Councilor. Any other items for open discussion? Okay, seeing none, I will just piggyback off of what Councilor Starr had stated regarding the after-school programs, and I look forward to hearing more about the rationale why the community centers are not open on those days off. But I did have the opportunity to tour the VOA Volunteers of America facility in the south central portion of town, which serves some of our neediest youth in the community. and it's youth that formerly would attend the Bowden Youth Center. We always call it Bowdens. They used to live across the street. But anyway, it was very impressive. So if you have not had an opportunity to review or take a tour of the facility, I would encourage you to do so. I mean, it's much more than just letting kids into the gym and throwing out a basketball or a volleyball. They have different classrooms for different subject matters. They have a computer room, they have a library, and they have certified personnel that are in place during this time. They serve dinner. A lot of these children would otherwise go without. So it was pretty impressive. So any other comments? Okay, seeing none, then we're going to move forward into our first presentation, and thank you for the open discussion. First presentation is by Mr. Jim David, our operations manager, and Jim is going to be reporting on the 2018 legislative session, which is currently in session, and will provide us an update. Welcome, Jim.
Good afternoon, Chair, City Council members. This Wednesday actually marks the midway point in the legislative session. The deadline for introducing a bill was last week, and what we are seeing is a very busy session, especially on the House side. If you look at the graphic in front of you, you'll see there are 319 bills that were submitted for this session just in the House alone. That's 100 more than last year and the most since 2008. The Senate is no shrinking violet, and they also have an above average number of bills at 215. So very active time out there. The next slide shows those critical action dates within the session. As stated earlier, last week was the deadline for introducing bills. Legislators will now be working towards moving those bills out of their House of origin by February 23rd. Looking forward, the legislature will adjourn for a short time on March 9th to allow the governor to consider the bills that it has passed, and then they'll reconvene on March 26th to consider overriding any vetoes. Some of the bills that we are following include, we'll start off here with Senate Bill 58. Since 2011, state law has allowed economic development to be included within a TIF in addition to industrial. This would add affordable housing, and affordable housing, the guidelines are basically that first-time home buyer threshold, and so that is be a part of TIF. That has passed the Senate unanimously and now is sitting on the House side, I believe, in House taxation. Senate Bill 84 prevents the state or any of its political subdivisions, which would include a municipality, to enter into any agreement that requires confidentiality. This bill has passed the Senate 21-13. Senate Bill 91, which many of you have heard about, this would create a state veterans cemetery in Minnehaha County, appropriating approximately $600,000. The bill's prime sponsors are Senator Jim Stalzer and Representative Larry Zickman. This bill just passed its first hurdle by getting out of the Military and Veterans Affairs Committee on the Senate and now is sitting in joint appropriations. Representative Kevin Jensen has prime sponsored House Bill 1290. This bill would require any agreement exceeding $500,000 between a public entity or between a public entity and a for-profit company be subject to certain disclosure requirements based on the private entity's age. This bill does include certain exemptions or propriety exemptions. It now is, as of this afternoon, there was no hearing scheduled yet, but it's sitting in House Judiciary. Senate Bill 98, Senator Deb Peters and Representative Greg Jameson are the prime sponsors of Senate Bill 98, which proposes to repeal the sunset on the 911 surcharge. If the sunset does take effect, our local 911 center could see a reduction of $200,000 annually. Senator Peters and Representative Doug Barthel are also proposing a companion piece to legislation, Senate Bill 99, and this would reestablish some information that was available to 911 call centers in the past, allowing these local centers to evaluate the customer data and to understand where the tax revenue is going and if it's accurate or not. It's currently available only to the Department of Revenue. Representative Tom, and I might butcher this name, Pischke, is proposing to reduce the tourism tax by a half penny, or $265 million. This is House Bill 1206. Revenue generated by this tax support tourism promotion efforts statewide and also the South Dakota Arts Council. Every few years, I kind of run through some of the terms that are discussed during session. One of them is hog house. I'm not sure if this is exclusive to South Dakota, more of a Midwestern term. But this is, when you hear the word hog house, think of just a major, massive amendment. Sometimes it is placed on a bill that is without the knowledge or the consent of the prime sponsor of that bill. To avoid some of these situations where you have an amendment that strikes everything within the body and replace it with something different, you have something like House Bill 1261. It is simply a bill that doesn't say much, but it is a vehicle that can be used in the future for putting something in. What that is, we don't always know ahead of time, but we do keep an eye on some of these bills. This is just an example of one of many that are out there and do serve a purpose. But it can be interesting to see some of these bills being significantly amended on the floor in the House or the Senate. Just want to bring your attention to LRC's website. It has been greatly improved. There is an ease of movement amongst it, and so if you want to learn more about the legislative session, if you go to sdlegislature.gov, you can see the bill, you can listen to hearings, you can create your own bill tracking list. If anybody needs help with that, please get a hold of me. We've already had a legislative coffee, but there are two more that will be coming up on the 10th and the 24th based on district. They will all be at the Holiday Inn City Center at 10 a.m. on Saturday. So we have Saturday, February 10th and Saturday, February 24th. Happy answering your questions.
Are there any questions for Jim? Councilor Staley.
Did you happen to hear, I thought that settlement disclosure thing, Art Rush's bill was going to be heard this morning. Have you heard anything about that?
I have not heard anything as of, they're usually updated after around 4 or 5 o'clock, so I have not heard anything on that.
Any other questions? Councilor Neitzer.
Can you go back to your slide about the disclosure bill, SB 84?
Yep.
When did the last part, the amendment, do you know when that happened?
It was last week that was amended to include both out-of-court and court-ordered settlements. And so basically, from my understanding of it, is that, as we all know, the Supreme Court had ruled on the local case here, and it had said anything that was done out of court, it has to be publicly disclosed. This does include that, but also those court-ordered settlements that they have to be public.
Well, so the Supreme,
unless ordered by the judge.
Sure, but so the Supreme Court had already ruled on the out-of-court part. Are they just putting this in just to reiterate or clarity or something?
I'm not exactly sure why that
was
including in, but I suppose if there's ever, it was not a closely split decision, but there was one dissent.
Sure.
And I suppose that's just, and there might have been some other cleanup language in there also.
There's a case that overturns it later.
Correct.
And then the other part was on the bill with public-private partnerships. I apologize. I haven't had time to read this over. When it says greater than 500,000, do you know what 500,000 of what total project?
Yeah, the agreement is 500,000. So if the agreement or the project itself is greater than 500,000.
Okay. It doesn't have to do with the amount of money that changes hands between the public and private. It's just
the agreement is 500,000 or if the project is 500,000.
Okay. And then the disclosure. Do you know if that is just at the time of inception, or because, I mean, over the life of a project, you could have investors possibly moving in and out, I mean, over 20 years? Or
I know that has been a concern that's been brought up on that particular bill. I'm not sure exactly how it is handled. However, I can find that information because that has been a concern. You have investors in, investors out. So how do you continue to keep that that live, so to speak, or active? I will check into that, what language they did include in that. I know there was concern about it. I assume that they did address it, but I will get that to you.
And maybe finally, as far as disclosure, does that just mean it's a public record, and then if anybody from the public requested it from
Correct.
the government governing body, they would have to supply the names? Is that what
is
disclosure would mean?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
So.
Councilor Staley.
Well, and just to respond to what Councilor Neitzer said, I have had a chance to talk with both of the sponsors of these. I feel very strongly about what happened in Sioux Falls concerning confidentiality and secret settlements. And Kevin Jensen and I talked a few weeks ago, and they were talking about just exactly what you're saying, is when would the investors be made public? And I said, personally, I wouldn't have a problem if we had an ongoing public policy that would just be something, if you're investing in a commingling your money with a private-public partnership, that your name would just be public documentation or public knowledge. So I think that's very reasonable. And I will say, and I've said this before, but I'm just very affirmed and grateful that people across our state are seeing that there are problems, and that in the spirit of transparency, they're trying to have some kind of an energy to say, let's make sure this doesn't happen again, for the good of everybody.
Okay, Councilor Rolfing, did you have any comments that you wanted to make on Senate Bill 91, Veteran Cemetery?
Yeah, it's, thank you very much
You're
for that. The cemetery, state cemetery, I just did an interview earlier today on that. The state cemetery, state veteran cemetery, we're hoping to be able to gift a piece of land that Sioux Falls has, and state of South Dakota needs to put up about $600,000 to get the ball rolling. And the beautiful thing about that was the room that the Veterans Affairs, Senate Veterans Affairs Committee was filled with veterans, filled with people in support, and that all but one, and this person, the representative was unable to sign on because of health reasons. Everyone else in the Senate and the House of Representatives was either a sponsor or co-sponsor on this bill. So it has unanimous support going through, and we're hoping that this will be the year that we can get it through.
And I would just remind the council that that resolution is coming before us this evening. Yep. So it's a great effort, and hopefully in the near future, the nearly 50,000 veterans that are currently eligible in the eastern third of our state will have that available to them and to their families in the near future. So thank you, Councilor Rolfing, for your efforts on that, and also Jim Stalzer and Larry Zickman at the state level, too. We appreciate their effort. And I would just like to make a couple of comments about Senate Bill 98 and 99, dealing with the 911 surcharge and surcharge data. The 911 surcharge is currently set at $1.25 per phone line, and is due to sunset. Actually, it was the sunset was extended a year, and this bill would remove that sunset. And if it's not removed, if it were to roll back to the dollar that it had been set at previously, as Jim had mentioned in his presentation, our metro management 911 services would lose up to $200,000 annually. And I have had the pleasure of serving on the Metro Management Board for the last 4 years, and it was a challenge last year in particular to resolve the budget, because despite the fact that the city of Sioux Falls is increasing 4,000 to 5,000 people annually, and that many of these individuals moving in, of course, have spouses and children, as we all know, are carrying cell phones around with them at very early age. Each of them should be paying the $1.25 on the surcharge. Despite that increase in population, our surcharge rate has leveled off. It's flattened, and it's making it very challenging for us to continue to meet the needs of our citizens for their 911 emergency needs. And it's difficult for us to adequately staff the Metro 911 Center too, because of this lack of funding that we're experiencing. So if the sunset were not to be removed, we would actually be going backwards, and it would make it even more difficult to meet the needs, staffing needs as well as the needs of the citizens. And then as regarding surcharge data, right now we cannot even access the information from the Department of Revenue. Currently, the phone companies are reporting to the Department of Revenue, and I believe it was prior to 2014 that information was available to, in this case, not to us as individual counselors, but to the Metro management team and executives, so that they could monitor that and make sure that they were getting everything that was due to them. But back in 2014, that information was cut off, so it's no longer available from Revenue, Department of Revenue. And so Senate Bill 99 looks to rectify that. And personally, I think there's a point where we should be able to actually audit the phone companies to ensure that we are getting everything that is due to the state and to the counties and to our cities for their 911 services. So just a little more information on that and the need for those bills. So thank you for that opportunity. Any other questions, councilors, for Mr. David on the legislative update? Okay, Councilor Irkenbach.
I just wanted to add to what you were saying,
Yes.
Councilor Kiley, because you're spot on with that. The other piece of that we have to remember is that if we're unable to use, if we don't get enough of the surcharge dollars to fund the 911 center, remember that's the ambulance, the fire, the police, all of those services for us, that's how we access them. If we're unable to fund that with the surcharge, then it comes out of city tax dollars and we have to find it. You know, we have to pay our share in order to make that center work as well. And then I just wanted to remind Mr. David that the Hog House is a South Dakota thing only. 1921 SDSU. So just your little government trivia for the day. So
SDSU did that?
it was an SDSU bill. Yeah, it was for a hog house. Yes, it was. It was for a hog house at South Dakota State University in 1921. So it's the first time it was done, and it's a complete revamp of a bill after it's been passed. So
Well, thank
only
you for
South Dakota.
Thank you for that bit of trivia, and also thank you for the additional information regarding the importance of the 911 surcharge. You're absolutely right. We'll be paying more as a city. So that concludes that particular item on our agenda. Our next item, our city clerk, Tom Greco, will be reporting, giving us a report on the 2018 election update.
Okay, I apologize. Tom Greco, City Clerk. This is what I'll discuss today. Talk a little bit about nominating petitions, the process that we're in right now. And then I want to give you an update on some of the nuts and bolts associated with the election as far as planning goes in my office. And then we'll finish off with some important dates for you to be aware of and for the public to be aware of as well. First off, nominating petitions. As you know, the first date that folks were able to circulate them was January 26th. The deadline to file those, the municipal nominating petition, is on February 23rd by 5 p.m. And as you know, there are 5 municipal offices that are out there: Mayor, At-Large Council Member A and B, Southeast District Council Member, and Central District Council Member. As you know, the Mayor and At-Large Council Members require not less than 200 valid signatures, and District Council Members not less than 50 valid signatures. Once we get done with that process, after the deadline has passed, a couple days later, February 27th, by law, we'll be conducting a drawing by lot for order on the ballot that will determine who's placed at the top of the list and so on and so forth. So that'll be happening here Tuesday, February 27th at Carnegie Town Hall. Consequently, and also for folks to understand, the nominating petition process is a requirement to have your name placed on the ballot. That February 23rd date, the deadline, is also the deadline for individuals who've successfully filed a nominating petition to withdraw from the race. In other words, after the 23rd, if they have not requested in writing to withdraw from the race, then their name will remain on the ballot. Precincts and polling places. A lot of work here because we have quite a few polling places, certainly a lot of precincts. I'm going to give you a rundown of things that we've discussed in this forum before, just to give you some awareness of some of the moving pieces out there when it comes to precinct changes. Number one, 4 polling places have changed. I've identified what the new ones are up there. Also on the map, they're shown with a yellow star. There were boundary changes as a result of the ordinance that we brought forth after the districting process up in the 4-6, 4-7, 4-11 area. That actually impacts about 500 registered voters. And then, of course, from 2017 redistricting, the boundary changes and redistricting do not encompass any precinct polling place changes, but the boundary changes obviously impact what precinct folks are in and what polling place they would eventually go. And then the 2017 redistricting effort simply redesignates some of the districts or some of the precincts. I've identified them on there and also just provided a note for how it impacts certain voters out there. We will, as the election draws closer, send postcards to the folks, to each household with a registered voter, to the folks that I have identified up here. Also on the far right, on the right bottom of the slide, you'll see we are combined with the school district this year, and as you may remember from previous elections, there are 3 what we call VPs, voting precincts, that are out there, 2, 4, and 6. Those are precincts that are outside the city limits of Sioux Falls, but they will be voting a school district ballot. I just want to give you some visibility on where they'll be voting. That, again, is for the combined election only. Election workers. This is a huge effort every single year. It takes well over 230 workers to help carry out Election Day activities, generally at the precincts, but also down at the Minnehaha County Administration Center building, which is also the counting center for election night. It's also where we process absentee ballots. So we've conducted this planning. We have 66 precincts that'll be at a total of 55 locations. So that means 66 election boards need to be solicited and hired. We're doing very well right now. I don't have any concerns with getting the workers that we need, but we will continue to work on it and keep an eye on whether people are able to do it. So we've had people confirm that they would and then a cancellation, but we've been relatively quick to be able to fill those positions in. We are required by law to conduct election school, so the week of March 26th, I'll be conducting election school in here for all of our workers that are working at precincts. They're scheduled throughout the week, and we'll notify, obviously, the workers of when those are, and they can sign up for one. Also, for your awareness, and as you may recall from when we discussed the budget, our election workers are paid. I've identified what their stipend is per day. Also, don't forget, we do pull people in to process absentee ballots and also sit on the resolution boards while the vote machines are tabulating. And again, I'll just conclude this slide by mentioning that we don't have any concerns lining up workers. We've been very successful. Tamara Jorgensen, the Assistant City Clerk, has really taken the lead on this, and we're in good shape right now, although there are still a few that we need to line up. Okay, coordination with counties and school districts. As you know, we don't do this in a vacuum. When there is some coordination required with the Minnehaha County, Lincoln County, and also the school district, and I've highlighted just some of the key things, the key areas that we're working on, just to give you visibility of it and let you know the status. So by agreement with the Minnehaha County Auditor, we work with them to design our ballots, to actually build the ballots that people see on Election Day. This is done through total vote, which is why we do it through them. Also, it's important to note that they take absentee requests for all Sioux Falls voters who vote, who live in Minnehaha County, along with those school district folks, and they also handle the voting, the actual voting piece, the tabulation. It's important to note here, because I'll get to it again when I talk about Lincoln County, that absentee requests for citizens will go to their respective county auditor, but the actual absentee ballot, if it's mailed, it'll be mailed from Minnehaha County, again by agreement to Lincoln and Minnehaha County folks. And also the in-person absentee voting will occur at Minnehaha County Administration Building. Again, that's for Lincoln and Minnehaha County Sioux Falls voters. Also, we rely on Minnehaha for equipment, everything from the election supplies, a large range of the election supplies that are used by the precincts on Election Day, to the tabulating equipment and other items that you see at the polling places. Counting, of course, on election night, by agreement, they conduct the tabulation for us. And finally, voter registration. They accept, obviously, voter registrations for Minnehaha County residents. In this case, we're concerned with those that are Sioux Falls voters. The Lincoln County Auditor, again, they accept absentee requests, but again, those requests are actually processed through Minnehaha County. There's close coordination between those two auditors when it comes to our elections, and also they accept voter registration requests from Sioux Falls voters living in Minnehaha, or living in Lincoln County. And finally, the Sioux Falls School District, we have a great working relationship with them. The key thing here, and really the next gate, is they'll provide the names that will go on the ballot around the same time that we'll know the names for our ballots so we can build them. Information for voters. I have some dates and deadlines on the next slide, which I'll share with you. But really a few key things for voters or potential voters to be aware of. Number one, your registration. Make sure you are registered to vote. The key is make sure you know where you're registered to vote, especially if you've moved in the last couple of years. It's important to check that because that will impact where you actually go on Election Day. It'll impact what your polling place is. So we encourage folks to check that out. There are a couple ways you could do it through the Secretary of State's webpage. You could also call our office or an auditor's office. The South Dakota Secretary of State Voter Information Portal, and also the Vote 605 mobile app, which are essentially the same information, but you just type in some basic information about yourself and up will pop your voter registration information. So it's a great resource for folks to look at to identify what precinct they belong to and again, where their polling place will be. Also, as I mentioned on a previous slide, people will be requesting their absentee ballots through their respective auditors. And also, all in-person absentee voting, which begins 15 days prior for the regular election and 7 days prior for the runoff election, will be conducted at the Minnehaha County Auditor's Office. On the right there, just a snapshot of our webpage where we have additional information for voters. It's a great resource, and I would encourage folks to get out there and take a look at our webpage for a wide range of resources, whether you're a voter, a candidate, or just somebody interested in the process. And here, this is a long list. It's not exhaustive, but it does highlight some of the key items that are out there over the upcoming months. The one thing I want to stress is that we're obviously planning for a runoff election. So our planning within the clerk's office encompasses that, and also our coordination with the folks I talked about before. But you could see a couple key things for voters. Registration for the regular election, the deadline for that is on March 26th, and that's the same day that absentee voting begins. We will hold Election Day on April 10th, so mark your calendars, everyone. 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. the polls will be open. A week after that, on April 17th, we'll do the official canvass for that. But even within that time period, we're going to kick off other items related to a runoff election if we have one, namely the drawing for candidate order on the ballot, and also the voter registration deadline will be shortly after that on April 16th. And then you could see the remaining dates there. I'll highlight the absentee voting when it begins on the 24th of April, and also the deadline, and we'll wrap up with the runoff election on May 1st. So I'll leave my presentation there and open it up to any questions. Consequently, on the left there is a snapshot of our water bill insert, at least the front side. Those will be going out with the utility bills in March. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Greco. Any questions for our city clerk? Councilor Neitzer.
Thank you. What are the statutory requirements to be able to work on an election?
For municipal elections, they need to be a registered voter of the city.
Okay, and then for the resolution board, with it being nonpartisan, do you know if there's, what gets you to be on a resolution board? Does it matter about party and things like that?
The same requirement. There's no distinction for a municipal election for your party.
Okay, and then finally, I should probably know this, but let's say you go and vote absentee, and then maybe you watch one of the last forums and you change your mind. Can you go vote that in the actual election and have the absentee discarded, or how
No,
does that
because
work?
what it'll show at the regular election is that you have voted absentee, or you have at least been mailed a ballot, in which case there could be, if you haven't filled it out, then maybe there'll be some coordination with the respective auditors, but generally, the answer is no if you have an absentee ballot.
In the election book, does it denote that for the worker? That
It does.
a ballot
It'll
was sent out,
show-
and
yes.
they wouldn't give you a ballot?
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
I won't say it. Councilor Staley.
Logistically, I know the school district, when they had their election, their standalone election, I think that's when it was, they had people going to the school, IPC Center, to do absentee voting.
That's correct.
Okay, so do we have a relationship with the county so that whenever the city has something, we just use the county building?
But by agreement. There was an agreement that was signed back in 2012. I'm sure there were ones previous to that. But we have an agreement where the terminology in it is they provide for absentee voting. And again, they're a great partner. And people for the combined election, to include those Sioux Falls School District only voters, would also go to Minnehaha County.
Thanks.
Yep.
Any other questions for Clerk Greco? No, seeing none. Then thank you very much for a fine report.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time and effort. Well, that is our final item on the agenda, so this meeting is adjourned. Thank you for all those of you out in the audience that attended this afternoon.